Hey guys, welcome back to more Reddit family drama stories. In this Ripestories video, I never imagined that coming back home would be worse than being in a literal war zone. I found out my dad and my deadbeat golden child sister sold my house while I was deployed because my sister told me to get off her property when I came home years later. Let's dive right into the video. And today's XXL title story is called My Dad and Deadbeat Golden Child Sister Sold My Home While I Was Deployed. So to start things off, I got back from my long deployment, picked up my duffel, rented a car and drove straight from the airport because I had not seen my place in so long that I just wanted to unlock the door, throw my bag down, shower and sleep in my own bed. I was exhausted, dirty and running on that weird mix of adrenaline and dead tired you get when your brain knows that you're finally home, but your body has not caught up just yet. When I turned onto my street, the first thing I noticed was a minivan that I didn't recognize in my driveway. The second thing I noticed was that there were little decorative planters by my front step that definitely were not mine. My stomach dropped a little bit before I even got out of the car. I cannot explain it properly, except to say that something already felt wrong before anyone even said a word. It did not really feel like my home. It felt like when you walk into a hotel room and realize somebody else had already been there. Then my sister opened the front door in slippers and one of my old hoodies and looked at me like I was the one trespassing. She actually said, "Can I help you?" At first I thought she was joking, in that stupid way she always had where she says something insane and then waits for everyone else to scramble around her mood. But then I looked past her shoulder and saw my living room arranged differently. My old chair was gone, the picture frame that always sat near the entry table was gone, and even from the porch I could tell the place had been changed around. I said, "Why are you in my house?" She folded her arms and gave me the smug look that I'd seen my whole life. "Your house?" Then my dad came into view behind her, carrying a cardboard box and stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me. He did not look happy to see me. He looked caught. That was the moment the whole thing turned real for me. He set the box down and the first thing out of his mouth was, "You were not supposed to be back until next week." Not hello, not how was deployment, not glad you made it home safe, just that. I remember standing there with my bag still over my shoulder and feeling this cold anger settle in because that one sentence made it obvious that they knew exactly what they were doing here and had been planning around my return date like I was some scheduling problem instead of their son and brother. I asked him, "Why is she in my house?" My sister answered before he did. "Dad sold it to me." She said it like she was proud of herself. Now, for anyone reading this, you need to understand the family dynamic behind this. So basically, my sister was always the golden child in the family. She was older than me by a little, but somehow she spent her entire adult life being treated like this fragile little project that everyone had to arrange themselves around. If she screwed something up, it was because life had been unfair to her. If I accomplished something, it was because I had always been independent and therefore needed less. That was how my dad justified it in his own head. My mom had been the only person in the family who really saw this for what it was, and after she passed away, the balance got a lot worse. Essentially, my dad started treating my sister like a permanent emergency and me like a reliable utility. She had bad relationships, bad jobs, bad credit, bad decisions, bad luck, bad roommates, bad landlords, bad investments, bad everything, and somehow every single mess ended with somebody needing to rescue her. Usually, that somebody was my dad, and when he couldn't do it himself, he came to me. By then, I had already learned that if you were the responsible one in my family, people stopped seeing you as a person with limits and started seeing you as the one who could absorb the damage. My sister was the one who needed, I was the one who could take it. That house was the first thing in my life that was actually fully mine. I had bought it with my own money before the market went completely insane, and I was proud of it in a way I cannot fully explain unless you've ever worked yourself into the ground for something simple and ordinary that still felt huge because nobody handed it to you. And yeah, it was not a mansion, but it was just a good small house in a decent area with a yard I could take care of and a garage full of tools I'd saved up for one by one. Every corner of that place meant something to me because I had earned all of it. When I got deployment orders, I made one mistake. I gave my dad a limited power of attorney for very specific things tied to the house: emergency access, insurance issues if something happened while I was gone, dealing with one fence contractor if the schedule slipped or whatever. That was it. I was careful when it was drawn up, and I remember being very clear about what it did and didn't allow. My dad acted almost offended that I would even need to say it out loud. He told me I was just overthinking it. Standing on my own porch while my sister told me my home belonged to her, I realized I had actually underthought it. I said, "Show me what you mean when you say he sold the house to you." And my dad tried to do that calm, low-voice parent thing he used when he wanted to turn nonsense into a family conversation. He told me to come inside and not make a scene in front of the neighbors. That line almost made me laugh because he was standing in my entryway after helping steal my house and was worried about manners. I walked in because I needed to see the damage up close. The house smelled different, my kitchen table was gone, my TV was gone, cabinets had been rearranged, and my mom's old dining table, the one thing of hers I had kept and used every day, was not where it should have been among other things. I asked where my things were, and my sister said, "Most of your stuff is in storage. Relax." That word, relax, nearly pushed me over the edge. I looked at my dad and asked him again if he had sold my house. And he said it was more complicated than that, which is how people describe crimes when they still think wording might save them. I asked how my sister, who had borrowed grocery money from me before and never paid it back, was supposed to have bought a house. She got offended and started talking about how I always looked down on her, and my dad started saying that she was trying to finally get stable and that I was away anyway and not using the house. That was the moment I understood the real logic. In their heads, my deployment had made the house available in the same way an empty parking spot is available. I was gone. She needed something, and he had access, and therefore, to them, the thing solved itself. I asked to see the actual paperwork, not a story, not excuses, the real paperwork. And that was when both of them hesitated, and that told me plenty before I ever saw a single document. My dad eventually admitted that he had gone through some private arrangement with an old friend of his, one of those self-important local guys who is always in real estate, without ever seeming to do anything normal. He was the kind of man who acted like rules were for people without connections, and he had helped my dad put together what was basically a fake private sale instead of anything clean and ordinary. It had not gone through the lender I used when I bought the place, and it had not been handled through a normal sale process. It was one of those sloppy side deals where everyone involved assumes that once paper has been filed, nobody will look closely enough to unwind it. Because actually my sister had not qualified for a normal mortgage, that part was no surprise. From what I later pieced together, she had scraped together some cash from her boyfriend's mom, taken cash advances on credit cards, and my dad's friend had tried to patch over the rest with some half-baked seller financing setup that only made sense if nobody checked whether my dad had authority to do any of it. In other words, it was a mess built by arrogant people who thought family guilt would do the rest. I left before he said something I couldn't take back. Also, I forgot to mention I am from a country in Asia, and corruption here is absolutely insane, so some of what happened was not even particularly surprising given what else happens around here. Anyway, my dad tried calling after me, and my sister shouted something about me always making everything harder than it has to be, which is the kind of thing only a person squatting in your stolen life can say with a straight face. I got a hotel for the night and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall for a long time before I even started making calls. It was not just anger anymore. Obviously I was angry, but underneath that was this really ugly feeling that I don't think people talk about enough when family betrays you. It makes you feel stupid in a very deep way. Not stupid because you don't understand what happened, but stupid because you loved people who had clearly been discussing how to use you. You start replaying every little thing, every time you helped, every time you trusted them, and every time you ignored some warning sign because you wanted to believe that you were not related to the kind of people who would do something like this. The worst part was thinking about my mom. She would have been horrified and she would have been ashamed of both of them. I kept thinking about how hard she worked to keep the family from becoming exactly this, and how after she was gone, it only took time for the mask to slip all the way off. That first night, I backed up every message I had, checked the county records I'd already started looking into before I came home, and called the attorney who had handled my original purchase. My attorney just listened, asked good questions, and told me not to meet them alone again, not to sign anything, and not to accept any version of "we can fix this privately," because by that point the problem was not just a family misunderstanding anymore. But instead, it was a fraudulent transfer, misuse of the power of attorney, and possible forgery tied to property and storage records. He also said something that stuck with me. He told me that people who do things like this usually make mistakes because they get greedy and start improvising, and he was right. The next big break came from my neighbor. She is one of those people who notices everything without being nosy in an annoying way. I called her to ask if she had seen unusual activity at the house while I was gone. And she told me yes. My dad had been there constantly, my sister moved in before I even got back, and a truck had come more than once and some of my things were carried out. Then she said something that made the whole thing even uglier. Apparently, my dad had been telling people around the neighborhood that I had decided to let my sister have the house because she was pregnant and needed stability. My sister was not pregnant though, she had never been pregnant. He had just made it up because it sounded better than saying he had handed his favorite child somebody else's house while the owner was overseas. That mattered more than it sounds like it would because it showed that he knew from the beginning that what he was doing looked bad enough that he needed a softer public story ready to go. It also meant that there were neighbors who could later confirm what version of events he had been pushing around before he got back. And by the way guys, before we continue, seriously, if you have family like this, you don't even need enemies anymore. To be honest, I would rather have the worst enemy in the world than have a family like this. And by the way, if you enjoy these XXL long relationship drama family stories, then please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and maybe write a comment because it would help me tremendously. Thank you so much for your support. And by the way, I forgot to mention one thing. A lot of people reached out to me recently that there have been 1 or 2 channels on YouTube that were essentially re-uploading my entire videos containing my voice, my thumbnail and everything. And yeah, suffice to say, those channels have now been taken down. Thank you so much for letting me know about this, and I really appreciate it when you keep an eye out for me. I cannot thank you guys enough. Anyway, over the next week I got the full picture. The recorded documents showed my dad had gone way beyond what the limited power of attorney allowed. The wording they used in places didn't match the authority he had. The sale price was wildly below market. The storage unit for my belongings had paperwork with my name signed badly enough that even I could tell it was not mine. There were messages from my sister asking whether they could shift dates around because it would look cleaner, which was one of the dumber things she put in writing. My dad texted me that they had moved some of my old junk, and I could sort through the rest later, which told me that he was not even trying to hide possession of the property anymore. Some of the missing items had been put into storage, and some had been sold off cheap, and some were just gone. The one that really got me was my mom's dining table. My sister had no sentimental attachment to it at all, and she knew exactly what it meant to me, and she still let it get hauled off with the rest of all of it because she had already moved herself emotionally into the position where anything of mine inside that house had become an obstacle between her and the version of life she felt entitled to. That was when I stopped thinking in terms of fixing the situation and started thinking in terms of consequences. I let them think that I was overwhelmed and maybe halfway persuadable. My dad called and I answered in a tired voice. He immediately tried to pitch peace. He said we didn't need lawyers or formal complaints, that my sister could just pay me over time and that maybe everybody had handled things poorly, but there was no need to ruin lives. That last part is always interesting because people only start talking about ruined lives once their own are in danger. My life, my house, my deployment, my belongings, that was all apparently negotiable for them. The instant consequences looked like they might land on them, and suddenly everybody wanted calm and perspective. I asked what exactly he meant by paying me overtime and told him I wanted specifics in writing. A couple of days later, they invited me to dinner at my aunt's house, and that alone told me that they wanted social pressure on their side. In my family, whenever somebody wants to get away with something outrageous, they call it getting everyone together and put food in front of it, like casseroles and side dishes can turn fraud into healing. I went because by then my attorney had already told me to keep collecting everything I could, including admissions and dumb attempts to clean the mess up. That dinner was one of the more surreal experiences of my life. And by the way guys, from everything you have heard so far, if this happened to you, aka if you were in OP's shoes, what would you have done with your family? Would you have cut them off? Would you have wanted legal consequences for them for stealing your property? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, my aunt was there, one uncle, two cousins, my dad, my sister, her boyfriend, and me. My aunt looked so tense when she greeted me that I knew she had been told a sanitized version of events, but not enough to feel good about it. My sister's boyfriend looked like a man who had slowly come to realize that he was dating a grenade. After some painfully fake small talk, my dad started giving a speech about family, stress, bad communication, forgiveness, and not letting outsiders profit from our pain. Then my sister slid a printed sheet across the table. It was their proposed payment plan. They wanted to pay me a low monthly amount over several years, no interest, while she kept the house. Buried in the same document was wording that would have me acknowledge the transfer as a misunderstanding and basically agree that there had been no fraud. It was such a ridiculous attempt at retroactive cleanup that I almost admired the nerve. I asked my sister if she had typed it herself. She said her boyfriend helped and he looked at his plate like he wished it would swallow him. Then I started asking questions one by one, like why was there a forged storage signature under my name? Why had she asked about backdating dates? Why had my dad told neighbors that she was pregnant, and why had they moved property before I returned? Why did they think any of this would hold up once the power of attorney was examined? The fake pregnancy lie was what really blew the room open. My aunt turned to my dad and asked if that was true, and my sister whipped around and asked him what he had told people, and he started stammering that he had only said it because it sounded better than "she needed help." My sister then got furious because apparently, even in the middle of house fraud, her dignity was the important issue. My uncle muttered that the whole thing had smelled wrong from the start. One of my cousins laughed in disbelief and then tried to cover it up. In the middle of all of that, my sister started crying and saying that I was trying to make her look crazy. I told her she had moved into my house before I got home and had the nerve to tell me to get off my own property. If that made her look crazy, I was not the one doing the work. Then my dad tried the final move. He looked around the room and said, "Was I really gonna send my own family to prison over what he called a misunderstanding?" I told him I'd already given everything to my attorney and the county and that I'd come to dinner because I wanted to hear what story they would tell when they had to say it out loud in front of family. That ended the room. Nobody had much to say after that, except my sister, who insisted I was bluffing. But I wasn't. The longer it went on, the worse it got for them, because every new thing that got pulled in showed more than one reckless mistake on their part. It showed a pattern, and there was the misuse of the power of attorney, there were false statements tied to the transfer, there was forged or false paperwork connected to the storage unit, and there were messages about shifting dates. There were admissions about moving my property, and there were witness accounts establishing when my sister had actually moved in. Then there was the fake community story about this pregnancy, there was the undermarket transfer price, and there was also a message my sister sent somebody else, which came out later, saying that once everything was in her name, I would just have to deal with it and he cannot do anything once it's done. That message hurt them badly. So did my dad's eventual admission that he thought if my sister was already settled into the house by the time I got home, I would cool off and let it go because I'd always been the one expected to absorb damage for the sake of peace. That was the first truly honest thing he had said in the entire mess. He really had built the whole plan around my tolerance. That was what made it so ugly. Because it was not just greed, it was entitlement mixed with years of family habit. He had spent so long assuming I would be the one who adjusted that he convinced himself he could take the biggest thing I owned, hand it to her, and I would eventually swallow it because doing the hard thing was always my role. That realization was worse than the paperwork. Eventually, the transfer was unwound, the house was restored legally to me, and claims were made for missing and damaged property. My records got cleaned up and they were both charged. And yes, they both ended up behind bars. They got buried by paperwork, by lies they had already told, by their own signatures, and by the fact that once records exist, they don't care about your family hierarchy. The private deal friend got dragged into the mess too. My sister's boyfriend bailed on her, and several relatives who had tried to stay neutral changed their tone once the actual documents started circulating, and they realized this was not me being cold or unforgiving. It was my father and sister deciding my deployment was a good time to gut my life. A few family members reached out to apologize to me, a few reached out to say that I should have handled it privately, a few, as always happened in these situations, really just wanted gossip disguised as concern. At first I answered a couple of them because I was still in that stage where part of me wanted someone in the family to fully understand what they had done to me. Eventually though I realized that as long as those lines stayed open, I was still playing the same role I'd always played. I was still available for the family to process itself through me, so I stopped. I blocked my sister and dad first. That was easy. There was nothing left there to salvage. They had gone way beyond selfishness into something colder. They had not just taken advantage of me. She had moved into my place, slept in my home, gone through my things, and waited for me to come back and accept it. The relatives who defended them got blocked, the ones who wanted updates got blocked, and the ones who said things like, "You made your point," or "Family's family," or "Your mother wouldn't have wanted this," got blocked fastest. Even some of the ones who apologized got cut off in the end, because by then I understood that staying in contact with any part of that system meant staying available to be pulled back into it. Going no contact with everyone felt good. I changed my number, moved later without giving any of them the address, and went no contact with the entire family. Not just the main two, all of them. There were no holiday calls, no updates, no secondhand messages, no just "hear me out," no "your aunt misses you." None of it. I was done being the family resource, the family utility, the family shock absorber, whatever name you want to put on it. I was done with it. I ended up selling the house after everything was resolved. Some people might not understand that, but by then it did not feel like home anymore. I had fought to get it back because it was mine, because what they did was wrong, and because I refused to let them get away with it. But I didn't owe that place the rest of my life just because I had once loved it. Too much of the worst period of my life was tied up in those walls by then. I fixed what needed fixing, sold it properly on my own terms, and used the money to start over somewhere else. My new place is quieter, and nobody in my family has ever been inside of it. Nobody in my family even knows where it is. There is a kind of peace in that which is hard to explain to people who have never had to build safety out of distance. The thing I still come back to more than the anger, more than the paperwork, more than even the prison time, is the fact that they really thought I would just take it and not fight them. That is what I will never forget. The house mattered, the money mattered, my missing things mattered, but the deepest cut was realizing that to them I was never fully a son or a brother in the same way they were a father and a sister to themselves. I was the one who could be used without, in their minds, it counting as cruelty. They would never have done that to her, and that is what made the whole thing break something permanently in me. It was not only that they stole from me, it was that they felt entitled to it and then expected me to participate in making it easier for them. And now guys, we will read two comments that were posted under the story, and one of them is sympathizing with OP, but the first one is the opposite. The first comment said, "Look, I get it, you were exhausted from your deployment and you bought the house with your own money, but sending your own father and sister behind bars over some real estate drama? That is completely unhinged behavior. Your sister has clearly had a tough life dealing with bad jobs and bad relationships, and your dad was just trying to help her get stable, and like he said, you were away and were not even using the house at the time. She did not throw your stuff away, most of it was put in storage according to you. You literally gave your dad the power of attorney before you left, so you should not be shocked that he used it to help out your own flesh and blood. And in the end, instead of working it out privately like a normal family, you went nuclear, got a lawyer, and ruined their lives. However, for me, the craziest part is that you ended up selling the house anyway and moved somewhere else. You didn't even want to live there anymore, and yet you still blocked your whole family and ruined their lives." So yeah, that was the unhinged comment from Reddit, and now a pretty normal one, to balance out the cosmos, so to say. This one said, "I am sympathizing with you. I feel so bad for you. I'm really fuming just reading this. I mean, what your family did was not a misunderstanding. It was literally a fraudulent transfer, misuse of power of attorney, and forgery. You gave your dad a limited power of attorney for specific emergencies, and he abused it to set up a fake private sale with this shady real estate friend. The fact that he lied to the entire neighborhood and claimed you gave her the house because she was pregnant proves that he knew exactly how guilty he was. They entirely brought these consequences upon themselves. Good on you though for getting your lawyer involved, getting the house legally restored to you, and letting them end up behind bars where they belong." And yeah guys, let me know in the comments where you were watching from today and what you think about this story. I will see you again tomorrow.